very common question that is often thrown around in the quail circles is what's the difference between a jumbo quail and a standard quail? The honest truth is they're the same bird, they're not different species. It's just that the jumbo have been periodically or consistently bred throughout the generations to add more weight. So they've been selected, the bigger birds, and then selected again and selected again. And it's almost like engineered that way to be bigger. And they would, in terms of comparison to a wild, the one that's in the wild, in the natural habitat, they just wouldn't get this constant supply of food in a natural environment like when you have them in a domesticated situation. So they have the opportunity in a domestic situation to really develop those genes into adding weight. So that's what's happened over the generations, many hundreds of years, possibly longer. So they're no different, jumbos versus standards. One little trait though is that if you're trying to develop specialised colours, it seems to be that only the standards can have that. The jumbos, you tend to struggle to get the specialised colours, probably because it hasn't happened yet through the generations, it takes longer. The birds I have, are almost all of them are technically jumbo. So there is a sort of a rule, and they say it's around 10 ounces at 10 weeks. So that's about 285 grams. The reason it's 10 weeks is with a standard, they stop growing at 8 weeks, so you keep giving them the game bird starter, which is the high protein feed, up to 8 weeks. But if you're looking to really develop a jumbo, you want to just give them another couple of weeks, up to 10, because they're actually still developing. If you don't give them the high protein food from 8 to 10 weeks, you might stunt their growth. They technically, from their genetic point of view, would have been a jumbo, but they might stop growing and you'll stunt them a little bit, which is not the end of the world, but it's just you have to remember that if you're trying to add that weight. And if you add that weight, what will happen with generally speaking, is you will get those bigger hens and you'll get those bigger eggs. So that is something you want to factor in as well. And then when it comes to processing for meat, some people like to have a bigger bird because they might only eat one at a sitting, whereas if you're eating a standard, maybe you're on the border of having 2 birds. It depends on how you eat your quail. So there is that as well. It's another thing to consider. And it's, if you have a lot of jumbos, if they're all big birds, and it's a sliding scale from standard to jumbo. I showed you one that was 14 ounces, so well over the 10, but that's getting quite big. They don't get too much bigger than that. But if you had a lot up around 14 ounces, then your cage is going to be crowded. So you need to actually have slightly less birds, and that's something you need to consider if you're trying to work out how many birds to keep. To show the comparison between a standard and jumbo and live birds, I've got one bird here. This is a standard. It's got a kind of a unique colour, and as I mentioned, it's common for unique colours to be just the standard size. This one is 9.17 ounces, so 260 grams, and that is undersized because it needed to hit the 10 ounce to be considered a jumbo. The other one I have, comparatively, this is a 409 gram, 14.39 ounces. You might be able to see this distinctly bigger bird, this one, and that is the difference. I have them outside, maybe it'll be easier to compare. You can see that uniquely coloured one, the standard, is definitely smaller than this Rosetta. There's a marked difference, and sometimes it's tricky to see because they puff out their feathers, but yeah, one's a jumbo, one's a standard. I don't make a big deal about jumbos, it's not a big thing for me. To me it's just an arbitrary line in the sand that I like to talk about precise weights, and I know a lot of people do talk about jumbos, mainly because when they're trying to sell eggs or birds, but it's not a big deal for me. Point to note though, if you don't selectively breed your quail, they will all drift back to that standard size because that's where nature sort of can handle it in terms of what something in the wild could actually maintain. The big jumbos would not be sustainable in the wild, so they will genetically drift back towards that one. Yeah, but it's pretty clear the difference, and just something to be aware of. Yeah, so that's it. Jumbo quail and standard quail, the same bird, just some genetically enhanced to be bigger. That's really all it is. So whatever you want to do, go get your standards or get your jumbos, or you can do your own breeding program and take your standards and make them into jumbos. It's not that difficult, and I've shown through other videos where you can selectively breed them to actually make that happen.